The forgotten corner of the wind cut through Dahlia Winter's threadbare coat like it wasn't there at all. Chicago had always been called the Windy City, but tonight felt personal, as if the gales were specifically targeting her 5'4" frame. The weather alert on her cracked phone screen, running on its last 2% battery, warned of the worst blizzard in 30 years. 3 months ago, she'd been finalizing her graduate thesis in sustainable architecture. 3 months ago, her father had still been alive. Amazing how quickly life could collapse, like a house with its foundation washed away. "The shelter's full, honey," the volunteer had told her an hour earlier, genuine regret in her eyes. "It's been full since noon. This storm's got everyone scared." Dahlia had nodded numbly, turned away. She'd been to 3 shelters already. Same story everywhere. The city's homeless population always swelled in winter, and tonight everyone was desperate for a roof. She trudged through the accumulating snow, the weight of her backpack containing everything she still owned in the world digging into her shoulders. Her student ID now expired, a portfolio of designs, a dog-eared photo of her father, a change of clothes, a toothbrush. The last $27 to her name. The medical bills had devoured everything else. $300,000 for experimental treatments that hadn't saved him anyway. The insurance had covered barely a fraction, and came the creditors, the eviction notice, the repossessed car. Her friends had helped at first a couch. Here, a meal there. But generosity had its limits, especially among other struggling students. She'd been too proud to beg, too ashamed to admit how bad things had gotten. Now she was just another invisible person, another shadow moving through the expensive Gold Coast neighborhood where she didn't belong. She turned down a side street, seeking shelter from the wind between tall buildings. The cold was making her dizzy now, her thoughts sluggish. She needed to find somewhere, anywhere, to wait out the night. A parking garage, maybe, or a 24-hour laundromat. That's when she saw it, a strange building, unlike its neighbors. While most of the street featured historic brownstones or sleek modern condos, this structure stood apart. It appeared almost like a tower, with clean lines and walls made primarily of some kind of specialized glass that glowed faintly from within. Despite its unusual appearance, it didn't scream wealth or ostentation. If anything, it seemed purposefully understated. A small sign by the entryway read Thorn Innovations. Dahlia vaguely recognized the name from news headlines. Something about revolutionary solar technology. The building appeared empty, but a light burned in what might be a lobby. The rational part of her brain said to keep moving. The part of her brain that was rapidly losing feeling in her extremities had other ideas. Before she could reconsider, Dahlia found herself ringing the intercom, her numb finger pressing against the button. Nothing happened. She pressed again, leaning against the door, suddenly too exhausted to stand upright. The snow was falling harder now, reducing visibility to mere feet. Her eyelids felt heavy. Just as she was about to give up, the door slid open silently. Dahlia stumbled forward, catching herself against a wall. The lobby was warm, minimally furnished, but elegant. No security guard, no receptionist, just clean. Lines, soft lighting, and blissful heat. "Hello?" she called out, her voice echoing slightly in the empty space. "I'm sorry to intrude. You need to leave." The voice came from behind her, deep and unwelcoming. Dahlia turned to face a tall man with dark hair that fell across his forehead. He wore simple clothes, a gray sweater, black pants, but something about the fabric suggested quality. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, and distinctly unfriendly. "I'm sorry, Dahlia," stammered. The storm. This is private property." His voice was firm but not raised. "Not a shelter." "I know. I've tried the shelters. They're full." Dahlia felt a rush of shame and anger. "I'll go." I just thought. She moved toward the door, but her legs betrayed her. 3 days with minimal food and hours in the bitter cold had taken their toll. The room tilted sideways, and the last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was a look of surprise replacing the annoyance on the man's face. The silent tower Everett Thorne was not accustomed to unconscious strangers in his lobby. As CEO of Thorne Innovations, he dealt with overzealous investors, persistent journalists, and the occasional corporate spy, but never someone who appeared to be genuinely in distress. He knelt beside the collapsed woman, checking her pulse. Steady, but weak. Her skin was ice cold, her lips tinged slightly blue. Hypothermia, most likely. He should call an ambulance, but something made him hesitate. The city's emergency services would be overwhelmed during the blizzard. And hospitals asked questions, required insurance, created paper trails. This woman, young, clearly educated based on the architecture textbook that had fallen from her backpack, might have reasons to avoid such scrutiny. Security override Thorn Alpha, he spoke to the empty air. A hidden panel slid open, and a medical kit emerged. Years of living alone had taught Everett to prepare for contingencies. Temperature reading. Subject in main lobby. Subject temperature 94.3 degrees Fahrenheit, responded the building's AI system. Mild to moderate hypothermia indicated. 30 minutes later, Dahlia Winter awoke on a couch in a spacious apartment, wrapped in thermal blankets, a warm saline Ford drip in her arm. The room was unlike anything she'd expected. No ostentatious displays of wealth, just thoughtful design plants growing in hydroponic chambers along one wall, bookshelves filled with engineering texts, and windows that had adjusted their opacity to block the raging storm outside. "You're safe," said the man from the lobby, now seated across from her. "I'm Everett Thorne. This is my building." Dahlia attempted to sit up, wincing at the pins and needles sensation as circulation returned. To her extremities, "Dahlia Winter, I'm sorry for the intrusion. I wasn't thinking clearly. Hypothermia does that." His tone was clinical but not unkind. "You need rest, hydration, and calories. There's soup warming. Can you tell me if anyone's looking for you?" Dahlia laughed, a hollow sound. "No, there's no one." Something in her tone must have registered with him because his expression shifted slightly. "I see. The storm's intensified. National Guard has closed all major roads. You'll need to stay here tonight." "I can't possibly. It's not a request. Medically speaking, you're not stable enough to leave." He stood, moving to a kitchenette where a pot simmered on an induction cooktop. "Besides, where would you go?" The blunt question hung in the air. Between them, Dahlia watched as he ladled soup into a bowl with efficient movements. "You don't know me," she said finally. "I could be anyone. You're an architecture student, or were recently. The book in your bag is graduate level. You're intelligent but desperate. You've exhausted other options, or you wouldn't have tried. A private building." He placed the soup before her. "Eat. Drink this slowly, small sips." As Dahlia ate, warmth gradually returned to her body. She studied her surroundings more carefully. The apartment occupied what seemed to be the entire top floor of the building, with views in all directions. Despite its size, it felt more like a workshop than a home. Models of buildings and energy systems occupied tables. Holographic projections displayed data streams. One wall was covered entirely in drawings, architectural sketches of structures unlike anything she'd seen. "You're that Thorne," she realized suddenly. "The clean energy pioneer. Your solar window technology is revolutionizing urban energy consumption." A slight smile crossed his face. "You've heard of my work? I studied your buildings in my sustainable design course. You've created self-sufficient structures that generate more power than they use." Despite her circumstances, professional admiration colored her voice. "Your innovations could help solve urban housing crises worldwide. That was the intention." Something darkened in his expression. "Reality has been more complicated." The storm howled outside, rattling even the reinforced windows. Everett moved to a control panel, making adjustments. "The building can withstand winds up to 200 miles per hour. We're perfectly safe." "We?" Dahlia questioned. "My AI system and I, Vivian," as if on cue. Soft lighting adjusted around them. "She manages everything: security, climate, research assistances. I prefer technology to people. Technology doesn't lie or betray." The bitterness in his voice surprised her. For a man who had everything, he seemed profoundly alone. "Why help me?" Dahlia asked finally. "You could have called the police, had me removed." Everett considered her for a long moment. 14 years ago, I was sleeping in my car, trying to convince investors that my energy systems were viable. One night, temperature dropped below zero. Car battery died. Janitor at MIT let me sleep in the engineering building. Said I looked like I needed a break. He shrugged. I suppose I'm returning the favor. It was the most human thing he'd said since she'd arrived. Dahlia felt something shift between them. Not friendship, exactly, but a tentative understanding. Rest. Now, he said, returning to his professional tone. Tomorrow will determine next steps. As Dahlia drifted toward sleep, comforted by warmth and a full stomach, she noticed Everett returning to a workstation. His fingers moved across holographic interfaces, manipulating designs for what appeared to be modular housing units. It's even. At this hour, in the middle of a historic storm, with a stranger on his couch, he worked driven by something she couldn't yet understand, the last thing she remembered before sleep claimed. Her was wondering what drove a billionaire to live like. A hermit in a tower of his own design, surrounded by marvels but devoid of human connection. Blueprints and beginnings, 3 days after the blizzard. Dahlia found herself in a small but comfortable apartment in the Thorne Innovations building. Wearing clothes that had been delivered without her asking, and staring at a job offer that made no logical sense. Urban Housing Initiative Project Manager, she read aloud, scanning the document again. This has to be a mistake. It's not, Everett replied, standing at the window of the conference room. 7 floors below Chicago. Was still digging out from 3 feet of snow. Your graduate work focused on sustainable, community-centered design. That's precisely what this project needs. But I never finished my degree, Dahlia protested. And with respect, Mr. Thorne Everett. Everett, she corrected. I was literally homeless 3 days ago. Now you want me to manage a multi-million-dollar project? He turned to face her, expression unreadable. 8. Which gives you perspective none of my other architects possess. You understand the problem from inside, not just as an academic exercise. The project materials were spread across the table between them. Thorne Innovations had purchased abandoned industrial properties throughout Chicago's struggling neighborhoods. The plan was to convert them into self-sustaining housing communities powered by Thorne's energy technologies. Affordable, dignified living spaces for those who needed them most. It was brilliant. It was exactly what Dahlia would have designed, herself, if given unlimited resources. And it was completely stalled in bureaucratic red tape. The city council has blocked permits for 6 months, Everett explained. Developers with connections don't want affordable housing cutting into their profits. We need a fresh approach. Dahlia studied the plans with growing excitement despite her reservations. These are good designs, but they're missing something. She began sketching rapidly on a tablet. Community spaces should be central, not peripheral. People need to see each other, interact. In these rooftop gardens, they should connect between buildings, creating elevated green corridors. For the next hour, she lost herself in the work, redesigning elements, explaining her reasoning. When she finally looked up, Everett was watching her with something like respect. The salary is non-negotiable, he said, as if they'd been continuing a conversation. As is the apartment? Consider it part of your compensation package. You'll have a team of 5 architects. I expect weekly progress reports. I haven't said yes, Dahlia pointed out. You haven't stopped sketching for 67 minutes. A rare smile ghosted across his face. Your hands have already accepted. And so began Dahlia's improbable new life. The transition was jarring from struggling to survive to having a team reporting to her. Some days she woke expecting to find herself back on the streets, the whole experience a detailed hallucination born of hypothermia. Everett remained an enigma. Sometimes days passed when she saw him only in formal meetings. Appeared unexpectedly in her office, asking pointed questions about design elements or community integration. He was brilliant but awkward, often missing social cues or delivering blunt assessments that left team members bewildered. He doesn't mean to be harsh, explained Juniper, the building's head of operations, and the closest thing Everett had to. A friend. His mind just works differently. Results matter to him, not feelings. He seems lonely, Dahlia observed one evening, after Everett had spent 3 hours working silently alongside her, redesigning energy distribution systems without speaking more than a dozen words. Juniper gave her a curious look. "You notice more than most." As weeks passed, Dahlia threw herself into the project with everything she had. This was her chance not just for stability, but to create something meaningful. The designs evolved into something revolutionary, modular. Communities that could be replicated in urban centers worldwide, providing not just shelter, but dignity. Gradually, she began to notice subtle changes in Everett. He attended more meetings in person rather than via holographic projection. He started asking questions about the potential residents, not just their energy usage patterns, but their needs, their daily lives. One night, working late, Dahlia found him examining her personal sketches, concepts she'd drawn while still homeless, daydreaming of spaces that could heal rather than just house. "These have soul," he said quietly. "My designs are efficient. Yours are ... human." Coming from him, it was the highest compliment. Something shifted between them that night, a recognition of complementary strengths, of shared vision despite vastly different paths. What Dahlia couldn't know was how her presence was affecting the rhythms of the silent tower, bringing conversation to spaces long filled only with the hum of machines, challenging a brilliant mind to consider factors beyond mere efficiency, and how in doing so, she was unknowingly laying the groundwork for changes neither of them could anticipate. Foundations laid bare. The project's first community meeting was a disaster. Dahlia stood in the empty community center afterward, surrounded by discarded protest flyers reading "No corporate takeover" and "Communities not commodities." "That could have gone better," Everett observed, examining a broken model of their proposed development. "They think we're just another developer planning to push them out." Dahlia sighed. "They don't trust your company. They don't trust me." "They're not wrong to be suspicious," Everett said, surprising her. "History has taught vulnerable communities that help from the powerful always comes with strings attached. But this is different," Dahlia insisted. "We're creating housing they can actually afford, with ownership paths built in." "They don't know that." Everett straightened his jacket. "My presence didn't help. I'm not ... good with people." The admission hung in the air between them. After 2 months of working together, Dahlia had learned to read the subtle shifts in Everett's demeanor, the slight tension around his eyes when overwhelmed by social interaction, the way he retreated into technical details when emotions entered a conversation. "Why do you isolate yourself?" she asked suddenly. "You could have teams of people handling these community relationships. Instead, you came yourself, knowing it would be difficult." Everett was silent for so long that Dahlia thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter than she'd ever heard it. "When I was 11, my parents left me at a gas station. They drove away, never came back." He said it factually, without emotion. Foster care followed. Some good homes, many. Not I learned that depending on people was dangerous. Machines were safer, predictable. The stark revelation stunned Dahlia. Now, she'd researched Everett's professional background extensively but found almost nothing about his personal life. Now, she understood why. "My first invention was at 16, a solar panel built from scavenged parts. When the technology started showing promise, suddenly I had family appearing, claiming connections, wanting shares in the company." His expression hardened. "Humanity has consistently proven my initial assessment correct. Not everyone is like that," Dahlia said gently. "Statistically enough, are to warrant caution." He turned to face her fully. "Your turn." "What's your story, Dahlia Winter, the real one?" She hesitated, then decided he deserved the same honesty he'd shown her. "My father was a professor, brilliant, kind, terrible with money. My mother left when I was young, couldn't handle his academic lifestyle. When he was diagnosed with aggressive pancreatic cancer, we tried everything. Experimental treatments. Not covered by insurance, I dropped out to care for him." The familiar ache returned as she spoke. "He died anyway. The medical debt took everything else." "Yet you don't seem bitter," Everett observed. "I am sometimes." The system nodded him. "He would have done the same for me."
Alia
picked up one of the protest flyers. "These people aren't angry at us specifically. They're angry at a system that's failed them repeatedly, just like I was." Something changed in Everett's expression and new understanding. Then we don't approach them as saviors. We approach them as partners. Over the following weeks, the project transformed. Dahlia organized design workshops where community members contributed ideas. Everett, initially awkward but increasingly engaged, explained how their energy systems would reduce utility costs and create local jobs. Gradually, suspicion gave way to cautious enthusiasm. The community began to take ownership of the project. Seeing themselves in its evolution, as they worked side by side, the barriers between Dahlia and Everett continued to erode. She came to appreciate his precise mind, his unwavering commitment to excellence. He found himself drawn to her intuitive understanding of human needs, her ability to translate technical innovations into meaningful improvements in daily life. One evening, after a particularly successful community session, they stood on the roof garden of the Thorn building. The city lights spread below them. "I've never had a true collaborator before," Everett admitted. "Someone who challenges my thinking rather than simply executing my vision. Is that what I am? A collaborator?" Dahlia asked, something unspoken in her question. "You've single quotes. Clearly navigating unfamiliar emotional territory. You're changing the variables. The equations I've lived by. I find myself reconsidering long-held conclusions." For Everett, this was as close to a declaration of feelings as he could manage.
Dahlia?
Dahlia understood the language he was speaking, one of caution, of tentative hope, of patterns disrupted. She reached for his hand, half expecting him to pull away. He didn't. "Some variables are worth changing," she said softly, as the city glittered below them. Two people who had built walls for very different reasons began the delicate process of dismantling them, brick by carefully laid brick. Wuthering Heights, the headline in the Chicago Tribune read, "Thorn Innovations Urban Housing Project Faces Final Vote Today." Dahlia stared at the article, her stomach tight with anxiety. After 8 months of work, community building, navigating bureaucratic mazes, everything came down to today's city council decision. "The Developers Association has filed a last-minute legal challenge," Everett announced, entering her office. Without knocking a habit she'd given up trying to break him of, they're claiming environmental concerns. "That's ridiculous," Dahlia exclaimed. "Our environmental impact studies exceeded every requirement. This project would create the greenest communities in the Midwest. It's a delay tactic. They're hoping to drive up our costs until we abandon the project." Everett's expression was grim. Their lawyers are very good. What remained unspoken was that conventional developers stood to lose millions if Thorn's affordable housing model proved successful. Innovation threatened their stranglehold on the market. "We need to go public," Dahlia decided. "Not just with statements, with everything, full transparency, exactly who benefits if this project fails and who suffers. I would make powerful enemies," Everett cautioned. "You've never worried about that before." "I wasn't protecting just myself before." His eyes met hers, conveying what he still struggled to articulate, that she mattered to him, that their relationship had become something he hadn't planned for it but now couldn't imagine living without. The past months had transformed them both. Everett still preferred his solitude, still approached problems with mathematical precision, but he'd learned to consider human factors alongside efficiency metrics. Dahlia had regained her confidence, channeling her experiences of hardship into advocacy while developing the business acumen necessary to navigate corporate realities. Together, they were formidable in ways neither could have been alone. The council meeting was packed, community members wearing green in support of the project, developers in expensive suits, media capturing every moment. When Dahlia approached the podium to present, a hush fell over the room. 8 months ago, I was homeless, she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Not because I didn't work hard or made poor choices, but because our system is designed to let people fall through the cracks. Today, I'm here representing not just Thorn Innovations, but every person who deserves the dignity of a safe home they can afford. She presented the project with passion and precision, highlighting the community's involvement in every stage of planning. When challenged by council members clearly in developers' pockets, she responded with data and firsthand testimony from community representatives, then Everett stepped forward, surprising everyone who knew his aversion to public speaking. "For years, I've believed technology alone could solve our greatest challenges," he said. "I was wrong. What I've learned through this project, through working with Ms. Winter and the communities, these developments will serve as that true. Innovation requires human connection, not just brilliant engineering." He laid out the financial model, transparently how the developments would become gradually community-owned, how profits would be reinvested locally, how the energy technologies would create sustainable jobs. "You can vote against this project," he concluded, looking directly at council members. "But understand that you're not voting against Thorn Innovations will survive regardless. You're voting against citizens who have waited generations for a system that works for them rather than against them." The vote was close 6-5 in favor. As applause erupted, Dahlia felt Everett's hand find hers beneath the table, a small gesture invisible to others, profound between them. 6 months later, first residents moved into Winterthorn, commons named by community vote to honor its founders. What began as an emergency shelter from a storm had become shelter for hundreds, with plans for similar developments in cities nationwide on opening day. As families explored their new homes, Everett and Dahlia stood slightly apart from the celebrations, watching their shared vision become reality. "I never believed in the concept of home," Everett admitted quietly, "just locations where one exists temporarily." "And now?" Dahlia asked. He looked at her. This woman who had collapsed in his lobby during a blizzard and proceeded to reshape not just his company but his understanding of connection. "Now I'm reconsidering that position, along with many others."
Dahlia
smiled, leaning against his shoulder.
Good.
"Because I have some new designs to show you. For us." Around them, children played in courtyards designed for community gathering. Solar arrays gleamed on rooftops connected by gardens. What they had created together wasn't just housing, it was possibility, built from the broken pieces of their past experiences and assembled into something stronger than either could have crafted alone in architecture. As in life, the most enduring structures are those built to weather storms together, foundations laid bare, strength found in vulnerability, and beauty emerging from the recognition that no one should face the cold alone.